The issue of whether there is a sense of national identity and pride for citizens in Singapore is extremely complex. The government has a significant history of obstructing civil liberties so that there is widespread resistance against government measures and a lack of faith. Additionally, the combination of globalization, low birth rates, and high immigration has contributed to a lack of cohesion among the citizenry. However, despite these factors, the People's Action Party has attempted to build a national consciousness through national educational policies, compulsory military service, the promotion of economic development, and amicable foreign policy. Although challenges still remain in developing a strong sense of identity, the government is aggressively pursuing this goal through various measures. Before describing the specifics of nationalism and identity in Singapore, it is important to mention some background and historical information. Singapore is extremely small and is 227 square miles. It has a very diverse population structure of 5.18 million people, with 75.6% of the population being Chinese, 13.6% Malay, 8.7% Indian, and 2.1% Eurasian and other. Singapore has a very strategic location between the Straits of Malacca and the South China Sea, making it ideal for stopover flights from major airlines. In past years, Singapore has experienced unprecedented economic growth and westernization. In the second half of the 18th century, the British extended their dominion in India and China. They then saw the need for a port in this region, so they established trading posts in Penang in 1786, Singapore in 1819, and captured Malacca from the Dutch in 1795. A preliminary treaty was established for the trading post in Singapore, and as a result, Singapore proved to be a prize settlement. In 1824, two new treaties were created to formalize Singapore as a British possession. In the Anglo-Dutch Treaty of March 1824, the Dutch withdrew all objections to British occupation. The second treaty resulted in the complete exchange of Singapore for increased cash payments. Singapore, Malacca, and Penang became known as the Straits Settlements under control of British India. Singapore became a major port for ships between Europe and East Asia. In the 1870s, it became the main export center in the world for rubber. It was experiencing widespread prosperity and attracted many immigrants. However, this ended when the Japanese bombed Singapore in December 1941. It then fell to the Japanese and remained under their control for 3.5 years. British forces returned in 1945, and Singapore came under control of the British military administration. On May 30, 1959, the People's Action Party won the first general elections for a fully elected government. The PAP's campaign was focused on ridding the government of corruption. From June 1959, Singapore became a self-governing nation with Mr. Kwan Yew as the first Prime Minister. The institution of self-rule meant that a cabinet and prime minister drawn from a legislative assembly voted by the citizens would govern Singapore. The cabinet controlled domestic politics, while foreign affairs were still placed under the British during this time since they were the colonial rulers. Singapore became independent in 1965 after it separated from Malaysia and became an official member of the Commonwealth of Nations. Yusof bin Ishak became the first president of the republic. From that point on, Singapore struggled with creating a national identity among a diverse population of immigrants. Its main strategy became taking advantage of its favorable location and economy. The government has implemented various programs in order to foster a sense of national identity. For example, the Ministry of Education implemented National Education in Higher Institutions of Learning in 1996. The main purpose of this program has been to instill a historic understanding of the nation in addition to a love for the country. Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong launched a new curriculum for primary, secondary, and post-secondary institutions in order to teach national ideals, history, and racial respect. Although many criticize this program as propaganda, some scholars have praised this form of education since it differs from the typical rote memorization emphasized in Asian cultures. In the 2007 Committee on National Education Executive Summary, the Ministry of Education provided data showing the success of the program at the college level. A popular opinion poll showed that approximately 90% of the population answered that they were proud to be Singaporean. Additionally, when students were asked whether they value multiracial characteristics of society, 94% responded positively. These figures indicate that the program has been working efficiently. At the higher education level, national education is carried out in a variety of ways. Students at the National University of Singapore are required to take a course from the Singapore Studies Department. This department offers classes on global, local, and cultural politics, such as Singapore, Asia, and American power. Other schools take students on field trips to culturally important places such as military bases. The incorporation of symbols such as the national flag in schools has allowed students to associate their sense of identity with a concrete image. Students are required to stand and pledge when the flag is formally raised or lowered in school ceremonies. The students must clench their right fist to the left side of their chest in order to demonstrate loyalty. Overall, the flag represents Singapore's independence, with red representing brotherhood and equality, the moon representing the youth of the nation, white symbolizing purity, and the 5 stars representing democracy, peace, progress, justice, and equality. The flag is considered sacred and should always be cleaned, not hung with other laundry, and should be sealed in a bag before disposal if damaged. Another notable form of encouraging devotion to Singapore has been mandatory military service for males that reach the age of 18. National service was introduced in 1967 to serve defense needs. This tool of national integration has reduced the cost of national defense while bringing together young Singaporeans of different backgrounds. A military of defense statement has explained the importance of this by claiming, "The community of Singapore is not a closely knit one. National service will provide an opportunity for all races to come to know one another better in an environment in which they will start to love their nation, to understand social obligations, and develop civic mindedness and strength of character. Depending on their mental and physical fitness levels, the men serve a 22 or 24-month period as full-time national servicemen. They either serve in the Singapore Armed Forces, Singapore Police Force, or the Singapore Civil Defense Force. After a conscript finishes his time in service, he is considered operationally ready and is known as an operationally ready national serviceman or NS man. Holding the status of an NS man is comparable to being deemed a reservist, and NS men make up over 80% of the military's defense. The NS men are supposed to represent the collective will of the nation to stand up for itself. Another key component of the project to build a unified identity has been the promotion of economic development. The government has implemented an export-oriented industrialization policy that has attracted a great amount of foreign direct investment. The PAP government has promised economic prosperity and better living standards for the population. The government first attempted to improve the commitment of the citizens to the country by starting an industrialization process with the State of Singapore Development Plan in the early 1960s. The purpose of this plan was to solve the economic stagnation and high unemployment rates by expanding manufacturing. Since the PAP has been so successful in delivering material goods, the people have begun to show great support. This strategy tends to work because much of the population is composed of immigrants looking for better opportunities. Amazingly, during Singapore's first decade of independence, its GDP grew 3 times, from 2.8 billion to 8.05 billion. Singapore's long-term economic strategies are constantly reworked in order to account for challenges and different priorities. In the past few years, Singapore has incorporated economic measures to promote innovation and retrain the workforce in order to maintain its high international standing. Additionally, the PAP has instituted measures that provide hedge fund managers with greater access to domestic funds and to develop the debt market. These novel policies, combined with Singapore's superb infrastructure and motivated workforce, have led to the rapid development of Singapore into an amazing financial hub. Many Singaporeans feel national pride and unity due to their nation's growing prosperous economy. Although the previous components mentioned have exclusively dealt with domestic policy, the PAP has also attempted to enact favorable foreign policy measures. The government works toward developing friendly relations with other countries and encouraging cooperation with other Association of Southeast Asian countries. This strategy of cooperation works towards the mission of building a national identity by encouraging economic development through improved trade and industry relations, and by informing other countries that Singapore should not be considered a third China. Rather, it has its own national history and complex, distinct identity that deserves respect and recognition. A notable example that demonstrates this policy includes Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew's visit to the People's Republic of China in 1976. While the trip may not have led to formal diplomatic relations, it did contribute toward a better understanding of each country's unique makeup and culture. The Prime Minister was able to convey Singapore's sense of sovereignty and how it is incorrect to consider Singapore the third China. Lee Kuan Yew spoke in English despite the fact he is fluent in Mandarin in order to demonstrate this separation. The PRC finally began to acknowledge Singapore's independence and the fact that it has the right to make internal affair decisions without external influence. Another significant example of positive foreign policy is Singapore's involvement with the UN. The PAP believes in the mission of creating a strong, effective UN that responds to the needs of its member countries. Singapore fully supports the constant process of UN reform to combat novel challenges of the 21st century. Singapore has also contributed toward peacekeeping missions in Afghanistan, Indonesia, East Timor, Japan, and China. Singapore's constant involvement and aid has promoted its shifting foreign policy stance from vulnerability toward strength and confidence. Singapore has used its influence in order to enlarge its diplomatic space and strengthen its security. National identity in Singapore is definitely a complicated issue due to a variety of factors. Due to the constant globalizing nature of the state and influx of immigrants, it is hard to create one true distinct identity. Despite these challenges, the People's Action Party will continue to work toward a coherent identity through projects such as national education, mandatory conscription, economic policies, and foreign policy measures so that Singapore will continue to prosper.